And welcome to another edition of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. On this episode, we will be talking about players who had success elsewhere. As usual, I'm your host, Steve Wirt, and I'm joined by Tim Hannon.
Hi, everybody.
So Tim, staying home is great, but sometimes you have to leave home to have a great adventure. Of course, with COVID, I guess we're not leaving home too much to have a great adventure.
That applies normally, yes.
Well, plenty of people who have been born and raised in Western Pennsylvania went on to have great success elsewhere. And so we're going to look into those sports stars and personalities who went on to have most of their success elsewhere. Kind of like the guidelines, just so people aren't like, well, what about this person or that person? You had to be born somewhere in Western Pennsylvania, play some sort of high school or college sports here, and then went on to have significant success elsewhere. Like if I said, who's Dan Marino, you wouldn't say probably, what would you say, Tim?
I would know who he is, yes.
Yeah, but you wouldn't say like, oh, he's the quarterback at Pitt way back when. You would probably
Oh, I
say, oh,
see.
he's
Yes. Quarterback of the Dolphins, yes.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, so that'd probably be So that's kind of our format and criteria. We'll also we'll do a little background on each person, why they're famous, and just like the local news that we all know and love, we're gonna Ken Rice this and focus in on the Pittsburgh connection. It's like Pittsburgh connection, like Modern Family, where somehow Sofia Vergara is now an honorary Pittsburgher just because she married Joe Montenegro or whatever, Montello or whatever his name is. So fun times for us. And so we're gonna kind of got different groups of people. We got people from Western Pennsylvania that you might have forgotten were from here. Then we'll have I call them the Pitt guys, the University of Pittsburgh guys, and then Western Pennsylvania quarterbacks. Since there's something in the water here that if you want to become a quarterback, grow up in Western Pennsylvania, I guess. So we'll start with people from Western Pennsylvania that you may have forgotten were from here. The first is, and I actually did not know this, I just happened to stumble upon this, was Stan Musial, Stan the Man. I always thought he was from like Missouri or something, but apparently not. He was signed by the Cardinals in 1938. Why Stan the Man Musial is famous is not just because he has an awesome nickname, which he does. He was a 24-time All-Star. 24. That's unreal. He's a 3-time World Series champion, 3-time NL MVP, 7-time NL batting champion, 2-time NL RBI leader, and he's in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. And he played most of his career actually all of his career with the Cardinals, because you didn't have free agency way back when. You just kind of stayed where you were drafted or signed or whatever. So now for the Pittsburgh connection. Stan Musial was born in Donora, and he went to Donora High School. And actually, at 15 years old, he played for a semi-pro Donora team called the Zinks. He was offered a scholarship to play for Pitt in basketball, but he turned them down, decided to go play baseball. And he actually played high school baseball with Buddy Griffey, who was Ken Griffey Sr.'s father. So
Oh, wow.
Ken Griffey Jr.'s grandfather. Yeah. So a lot of fun Pittsburgh connections going on there with Stan the Man Musial. So did you know Tim, you're pretty smart. You probably knew he was from Donora, huh?
I knew that. I don't know that I would have remembered that if I was putting together a list. And you talked about 24-time All-Star. That guy played forever, and then he lived forever. He died in his 90s, and it wasn't that long ago, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it was I want to say 2016. Let me look that up. I know, and I was looking at it, was like, boy, he really, like you said, he wasn't. He died in 2013. So
Okay.
January of 2013. He he was born in 1920. So it's 97 years old. So he lived a pretty long life, and is one of the more popular Cardinals players ever, I would, guess. But moving on from baseball to basketball and people you didn't realize, and I didn't realize this guy was from here either, but I knew there was a reason I always liked this guy, Chuck Daly. Chuck Daly was born in Kane, Pennsylvania, which I know where that is, a pretty podunk town, kind of north of Pittsburgh. What do you say, about an hour or so, hour or two? Tim goes to Kane all the time. He hangs out up there.
I'm big at Kane. In Kane, yeah, they love me up there.
Yeah. I mean, that's where your hunting camp is, I'm sure. Yeah. But what he's famous for, he coached the Detroit Pistons to 2 NBA championships, and he came up with the Jordan rules, which I just love, which was basically just like be rough on Jordan to the point of almost fouling him every play and don't let him get the ball or be easy on him. He's also like very highly regarded. He coached the Dream Team in 1992, which was the first professionals to play in the Olympics. And so, that was a big deal. And it probably took a lot of coaching skill to coach those guys, because you would would you have Bird, Jordan, who
Magic
else? Patrick
Johnson,
Ewing,
Charles
Barkley.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not easy, I'm sure, to coach those guys. So, but an all-star team's always tough to get to come together. But so he did a good job. They went to the gold, and it was pretty easy because they were really good, and the rest of the teams hadn't caught up to much as they have now. He's also in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He coached at Duke. He was not a head coach, but he was like an assistant coach at Duke. And he has a Lifetime Achievement Award named after him. Like I said, he's considered one of the top NBA coaches in league history. The Pittsburgh connection was he coached at Punxsutawney High School, and he coached at Penn, the University of Pennsylvania, and he took that team to a Final of 4. And he actually had three NCAA Final Four appearances. I think he had one with Duke too, and one somewhere else. So he's pretty successful in college and the pros. And who knew that about Chuck Daly? So
that one I did not
awesome
know.
coach all around.
Yeah, I did not know that one, and I was a huge fan of those bad boy era Detroit Pistons. That was my favorite team back in the day. So I love Chuck Daly and Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars and that whole team. So very cool. I did not realize he was from these parts.
Yeah, and I think too, probably coaching the Pistons, with John. Who else was John Sally was on those teams, and who's the
Bill
Laimbeer guy who would foul? Yeah, that guy, he would foul everybody. That would definitely give you some dealing with personalities,
Right.
definitely, and that's definitely what he was, the coach that Dream Team definitely needed. So, but good for him. Brandon Saad, we're into hockey now. Brandon Saad was drafted by the Blackhawks in the second round, 43rd overall. He has played for Chicago, Columbus, and Colorado. And why he's famous, he has won 2 Stanley Cups for the Chicago Blackhawks, one in 2013 and one in 2015. And he actually scored a game-winning goal in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final in 2015. And he made an All-Star game in 2016. So that's he's a pretty solid hockey player. He's not like a superstar per se, but he's a good hockey player. Now for the Pittsburgh connection, he grew up in Pine Richland. He played for the Pittsburgh Hornets, which is like a little league for hockey, I guess, kind of. And he's probably the best Pittsburgh's best locally grown hockey player. He has 371 points so far, and I misspelled that. He's the most successful Pittsburgh born hockey player. So there's Ryan Malone and RJ Umberger, but they just didn't have the success that this guy's had. This guy's had, I don't think either of those guys made a Stanley Cup final. Or no, Ryan Malone. Did Ryan Malone make one with the Penguins? I don't think so.
Yeah, he did.
But,
yeah,
okay.
The first one.
But once again, Yeah. So once again, but he was like actually had success in Pittsburgh. So and Sod hasn't been in Pittsburgh at all. Although I remember every time he like there's a rumor about it, everybody wants to trade for him because he's like local guy. But I mean, would you agree? Maybe probably the most successful hockey player to come out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think that.
RJ Umberger, you could argue, but I don't
No,
know. RJ Umberger has more points. But
no, I think that's fair because he was, he was important to those Blackhawk teams. I think if he doesn't play for championship teams, then maybe it's a little closer of an argument. But he not only played for them, but he was a pretty key piece on those teams when they were winning Stanley Cup. So I would absolutely say he's probably the best local hockey player.
okay, well, there you go. Tim's not one to disagree with the opinion. That's because my opinions are always right. Right? Yeah, that's it. They're so
I can't
sound.
disagree with that.
Moving to wrestling. Good God, somebody think of his children of Jim. I wish Jim Ross was from here. I would have put him on the list.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah, somebody think of his family. Stop the damn match, you know. But Kurt Angle, he's background. He grew up in Mount Lebanon. Why he's famous? He won an Olympic gold in 1996 Atlanta with 2 fractured cervical vertebrae, and somebody probably should have stopped the damn match. But Kurt Angle's like a man, a boy, where the rest of us are not men as much as he has. And he had to beat a guy from Iran, actually. And if I've watched the match, like the guy from Iran, like tries to like cheat and raise up his hand, like have the ref raise up his hand, you know, at the end because it went to like a decision on the judge's card. But then it's like, no, Kurt Angle won. So, but it's pretty funny. And he was somewhat famous for that. And if he would have stopped there, maybe he doesn't make the list. But probably what put him definitely over the top, and this is probably what most people remember her for, is he went on to become a pro wrestler with ECW, WWE, blah, 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 blah. I don't know the rest of the wrestling iterations there. You're much more into pro wrestling than I am, Tim. So he is in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. And one of his, obviously somebody you know, John Cena, who's a very famous wrestler, said of Angle's legacy within the WWE, he is without question the most gifted all-around performer we have ever had step into a ring. There will never be another like him. So that's kind of like in your era. You still watched wrestling when Kurt Angle was around, right?
Yeah, and he was he came into those like that early 2000s phase when wrestling was kind of having that renaissance, when he was paired up a lot with The Rock. The Rock was the baby face and Kurt Angle was the heel. He was really good at being a heel because his shtick was that he was this very arrogant, like real wrestler. Like, I'm a real wrestler. I wrestled in the Olympics and I'm above all of these, entertainment wrestlers. And I have this, high IQ and everything else. Like, he was just very arrogant. And I went to a Monday Night Raw event in Pittsburgh back then. It was probably 2000, 2001. And he came out and everybody's cheering for him, even though he's, the heel, the bad guy. And he tried so hard to work the crowd. He's like on the microphone, he's like, I'm the only good thing that ever came out of this pathetic town. And everybody's like, yeah, tell us, Kurt, you're right. He just, no matter what he said, yeah, he could have said anything. And everybody's like, yeah. So he was very, his personality. And it was funny because after the Olympics, I don't know if you remember this, Steve, he had a very brief stint where he did the sports on, I want to say like the WPGH, the local Fox affiliate here. He did the sports on their 10 o'clock news cast, and he was terrible. Like, he would have to read a teleprompter. He was totally wooden. He had like no inflection in his voice. And you're like, oh man, dude, like it's cool that you won that gold medal, but entertainment, is not your field. And I think he just needed the right, reading a teleprompter on a newscast was not the right fit for him. But being a performer in the WWE, he fit very well and had a lot of success.
That's great. Like, he should have started to say like crazy stuff, like, let's rip down Mayor Caligiuri, rename Mount Washington Mount Angle. Like, see how far he can go with it.
I just remember, like, he just kind of, like, you could see it in his face too. It was like, oh my god, I think he was actually, I mentioned he was paired up with The Rock. I think that's who he was fighting that night. And
So the Rock was the good guy and he was the bad guy.
Right.
Is that how it worked? Okay.
And the Rock had a similar path to that. The Rock was a heel who everybody loved, and so they kind of had no choice but to make him the baby face because people just loved him. And and Kurt Angle, he was good as the heel. People just loved to hate him, but in Pittsburgh it just didn't work because he was from here, and we like guys that are from here.
That's incredible. Well, getting to the Pittsburgh connection, and that's funny that you said real wrestler because it's actually in my notes. I didn't know that because I don't follow wrestling like you and some of our other friends do. So, but as a real wrestler, he finished third in the Pennsylvania State Wrestling Tournament. I don't know who finished ahead of him, but they must have been a heck of a really good wrestlers. He went to Clarion University, and he's actually an NCAA real wrestling. He's a 3-time All-American, and he's a 2-time NCAA national champion. He's a runner-up, the national champion in '91. So that's probably 3 years in a row he was in the final. That's just amazing. And I guess Brock Lesnar is kind of the same kind of route, right? But Brock Lesnar, well, they don't do weight class and like fake wrestling, right? So they just all wrestle each other, right? Pretty much. So I think, has he ever wrestled Brock Lesnar? You think?
Oh, I don't know. I quit
Yeah.
watching it religiously around that 2000s era. So I am not up to current on anything wrestling.
Because that would actually be like a real wrestling match. It's like, oh boy, these two guys are like real wrestler. Although Brock Lesnar is way bigger than Angle. I don't know if they would be allowed, like because you have to be a certain weight and all that. But
yeah,
there you go. There's a fun debate. Who would win? Who would win in a wrestling match between Angle and Lesnar?
His catchphrase.
Brock Lesnar though was
his tagline. Was
so bad at talking. Remember they had to get a guy to talk for him. I remember that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and Angle, his kind of his tagline was, "It's true." Like that was his big, his big tagline.
That's great, but yeah, he seems like a really good guy all around, and I know he struggled with some addiction issues and stuff. But I think he cleaned that up, and he's had a great career. What a fun ride it seems like he's had. Moving back to sports where, well, maybe the outcome isn't fixed that we know of. That would be LeVar Arrington. And he was born in Pittsburgh, and he did go to Penn State. Why he's famous. He leapt over an offensive line in college against like Illinois to stop a 4th and short play. So that kind of started became his thing, like the LeVar leap. So that kind of started as like his charitable organization is called the Leap or something like that, or Leaping for Charity. I don't know. He's leaping lizards or something. I don't know. Quote Annie. I remember he blocked a game-winning field goal attempt by Pitt. I think that was in '96 by leaping. That was after.
It was '99. I remember that game very clearly.
Was that '99? Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. But that was. I remember earlier in the game, he was covering Lateef Grimm, who was a wide receiver, and he tipped the ball right to Grimm, and Grimm like blew by him because like Grimm's a wide receiver and LeVar Arrington's a linebacker. I guess Jerry Sandusky was like distracted or something that day and couldn't figure out to not have him cover, Lateef Grimm. I don't know. In 1999, Sports Illustrated had him as a Heisman candidate. So that's even better that he got burned by Lateef Grimm while he was a Heisman candidate. He was drafted by how do we want to handle it? Do we just want to call them the Washington football team?
They were called the Redskins back then. So,
yeah, I mean, all right. Well, they're no Cleveland Guardians, that's for sure. Yes. But he was drafted by whatever you want to call that team that resides in Washington in 2000 with the 2nd pick. And I think that was 2nd pick overall.
It was.
So, and he became a 3-time Pro Bowler, he was a 2-time All-American, and he was 2-time All-Team Big Ten. Unfortunately, he had to work for Danny Snyder, who couldn't find a championship with a flashlight and a map. So, The Pittsburgh connection. He played at North Hills and was very good high school player. Like the stories I've heard, like he was a very good running back. He had 4,000 rushing yards and 72 touchdowns in high schools. He was an excellent running back in high school. He was a Gatorade Player of the Year. He was also USA Today's Pennsylvania Player of the Year. So that's your Pittsburgh connection. He was a very good high school player, and the stories I've heard from about him in high school are quite legendary. So,
Yeah, he's one
any
of the
other
few.
great memories?
He's one of the few Penn State players who I just really, really liked. I mean, I just liked him a lot at Penn State, and I was rooting for him in the NFL. And you mentioned that draft. I remember that he was the second pick because Cleveland had the first pick. And I just remember, just please don't pick Arrington to go to the Browns. Please don't. I just did not want him to go to Cleveland. And they ended up picking his teammate, Courtney Brown, who was a bust because, Cleveland. And so then he went to Washington at the number 2 pick. And like you said, he had a pretty good NFL career, but it was just super short. It was like a 5-year career or something because he had injuries. So it was kind of a shame. He never quite, lived up to the potential. He could have been an all-time great player. He just career was cut way short by injury. But I always really liked LeVar.
And I think he's does stuff on like media stuff, and he's not bad in the media. He's pretty well, like he's not like Kurt Angle, like today on the sports news. No, he's actually pretty competent sports guy. So
Yeah,
good for him. I never liked him, and I may just as a Penn State guy. I don't know. I always liked Joe Jaravicious, who was on that team, much better. So I don't know. He ended up playing for the Giants, I think, and then Seattle. He did play for Seattle in Super Bowl 40 against the Steelers. So you have that in your hat, I guess. Staying with football, and another guy that's actually is very well decorated and accomplished. That would be Ty Law. He was born in Aliquippa, and why he's famous is he had a great career at Michigan. He went to the University of Michigan, and he was a defensive player that got burned on the Cordell Stewart Hail Mary way back. What was that? 91, 92?
4,
I don't know.
94.
94, was it 94?
Yep.
Yeah, because that was right. That was Cordell's senior year. Yeah. So, but he was also 2-time unanimous Big Ten. He was drafted in 95 in the first round. He was the 23rd pick by the Patriots. He ended up winning 3 Super Bowls for New England. They were all under Belichick because I guess he was picked under, was that Parcells then? 95? That was probably Parcells. It was either Parcells or Pete Carroll, one of those 2 guys. He had an interception return for a touchdown in Super Bowl 36. That was the first points in the Super Bowl for New England. He also has 5 Pro Bowls. He's a 2-time NFL interceptions leader. He's in the NFL Hall of Fame as of 2019. So, did they have a class? They did not have a class last year, did they? Or did they just? They did, but they put it off to this year.
Right.
That's the one. That's the one Cower and all of them are in.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. He has 53 career interceptions in the NFL. That's 24th all time. So he had a really great football career, quite honestly. Hail Mary, not outstanding. And I remember Hines Ward had like 8 catches for 100 yards again in that infamous championship game the Steelers lost. And that was they put Ty Law on Hines Ward to specifically make Hines Ward go away, but Hines Ward still had a pretty effective game. So that was the game when Belichick came up to Hines Ward and said, "Boy, if you ever get cut or you ever don't want to play for Pittsburgh anymore, I'll take you in a heartbeat." So, but anyway, any Ty Law? I mean, do you think he gets too much hype because he in New England, or just the appropriate amount of hype? Or I think he was good. I honestly do.
Yeah, I think he was very good. And to your point about Super Bowl 36, I mean that play that he made, intercepting that pass, really shifted the momentum of that game because then New England had the lead, and they could play that physical style football. They weren't trying to come from behind.
Yeah, and he's a good player, and Hall of Famer and 5 Pro Bowls, 2 great players. So the Pittsburgh connection. Tony Dorsett is actually Ty Law's uncle. I did not know that. and he played football. He played football, basketball, and track in high school, and he was actually the MVP of Aliquippa's basketball team. So
Oh wow.
Aliquippa is one of those like legendary like towns in Western Pennsylvania where you're just going to hear that a couple more times throughout this podcast. People from Aliquippa tend to do well in the NFL. So now Tim will definitely recognize this next person. So that would be Jason Taylor. His background was he was born in Pittsburgh, and he actually played football at Woodland Hills High School. Why he's famous? He was the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year for 2006. He played, I'd say, most of his career for Miami. I mean, I think he might have played for somebody else, but mainly for Miami. He's Walter Payton Man of the Year in 2007. He's actually also in the NFL Hall of Fame in 2017. He has 139 sacks, which ranks him fourth all time. He's also the all-time leader in fumble returns for a TD with 6, and he's the all-time leader in interceptions by a defensive lineman with 3, which is pretty impressive. I mean, defensive linemen normally don't get that many interceptions, but he was kind of like almost like a basketball player playing football. And but this is the best part of his story, though. The Pittsburgh connection is that he played football at Woodland Hills, and he had a great college career at Akron. That's the reason. But he went to elementary school with one Tim Hannon. So,
Yeah, or as I
what do
like
you
to say,
remember about Jason Taylor? Jason Taylor in like third grade. Did he like beat you on like in the playground? And you're like, oh, this guy's really good.
yeah, as I like to say, Jason Taylor went to elementary school with me. No, I don't remember what much. He was he was a grade or two above me. We went to a small school, so like I knew him, and my mom knew his mom and that kind of stuff. But you know, I don't remember much at the time. You know, it was just a bunch of kids in grade school, and it was really only years later that you know, somebody kind of, it was when he started playing in the NFL. Hey, you went to school with that guy, and I was like, oh, I wonder if he'll be any good. And then sure enough, he's a Hall of Famer. So good for him.
Who knew you were like, you know, going to school with an NFL Hall of Famer? I can't say that. I didn't go to school with any. We did go to school with what's her name? Susie Susie, the chick from the real world.
Meister, yeah.
Yeah, Susie Meister. So
yeah, we've had some brushes.
Look at that. You got
fame.
You got two famous people.
Yeah.
Jason Taylor and Susie Meister. There you go.
Yeah.
So shout out to Susie if she's listening. I doubt it. So now that's the list of people we may have forgotten. I'm sure Jason Taylor, people didn't realize that him, and I know Ty Law, probably everybody knew that, and LeVar Arrington for sure, but definitely like, you know, I would say some of those other people, definitely they didn't know. The University of Pittsburgh guys. These are all guys that played at Pitt that became much more famous after Pitt. So we'll start with probably the most famous person from Pitt currently, I would say, because I think if you said this name, most people would know it. Aaron Donald. And he's born in Pittsburgh, and he was actually drafted by the St. Louis Rams with the first round 13th pick. And gee, why is he famous, you might ask? Well, he was the NFL's Defensive Rookie of the Year 2014. He's the NFL Defensive Play. My goodness, really? I didn't realize. I wrote that. It's just kind of hit me too. 3 times, 2017, 18, and 20. That's wild. He's a 6-time first team NFL All-Pro, and he's a 7-time Pro Bowler. He's almost like Mean Joe Green for the St. Louis/LA Rams. So that's pretty impressive. So Pittsburgh connection. He grew up in Penn Hills, and he wasn't highly recruited. And I even read somewhere he said he was kind of lazy when he was a kid, so he didn't like to work out and do stuff. But he did make first team class quad A in the state. So that's back then that was probably the highest level of high school football in the state of Pennsylvania. His senior year at Pitt is really when he came together. Because I remember, I mean, he was really kind of a nondescript, just kind of one of those guys. And then the senior year, he just went absolutely off. He had a great year. He won the Bednarik Award. He won the Lombardi Award. and he run as an All-American, and he won the Outland Trophy, which I didn't realize they gave the Outland Trophy to defensive linemen, but apparently they do. He in his senior year, he had 28 tackles for a loss and 11 sacks, and we'll have many different links throughout this. We'll put them up on our website, but there's some. If you could watch the Georgia Tech game highlights, Georgia Tech runs that option, and he just absolutely defeated the option. They couldn't run it. If you can't block Aaron Donald, they just wow. He's a very good defensive player. His BK, and it all kind of happened his senior year. I'm not sure what went on or what happened, but maybe it just took him that long to develop, and the light bulb went off, and he hasn't looked back since. So good for him. And I wish, you think, I don't know, maybe the Steelers weren't drafting high enough. Then I wish they could have drafted him, because he'd be great on that defense. Him and Cam Hayward have been pretty awesome. But
I remember how good he was that last year at Pitt, and he just was so good. And I thought, he definitely deserved to be a number one first round draft pick. But you thought, okay, he's really good. I don't know that I've ever would have pegged him being literally one of the greatest defensive players in the history of the NFL. I mean, you talked about 3 times, Steve. You know who else has won that award 3 times? Lawrence Taylor and J.J. Watt. That's it.
That's the list. Wow.
That's it.
I believe it, because I think Polamalu only won it once. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
Here's guys who won it twice: Joe Green, Mike Singletary, Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Ray Lewis. They only won it twice. So
yeah,
if he wins, and he's not anywhere close to the end of his career. If he wins it another time, he'll be the only guy in league history to win that award 4 times. I mean, he's an all-time great already. And I don't know. He was very good at Pitt. I just never would have guessed that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just, because that's what makes him such a perfect candidate for this list, because I think if you say Aaron Donald, people probably remember that he played at Pitt,
right?
He's had such a great NFL career.
I was cleaning out my file cabinet at my house a little while ago, and one of the things I had in there was I had a little handout that they gave us. I went to Pitt's. They used to have like a recruiting event in the winter. It was from the winter of 2010, and they'd have that Dave Wanstead was the coach, and he would get on the stage and he would sort of like talk about all the recruits coming in that year, and they gave you a little handout with a little description of all the guys. And I was looking at this thing, and I saw Aaron Donald was on that list, listed as being from Verona and played at Penn Hills. And I had scribbled next to it, because I guess I was taking notes when Coach Wanstead was talking, that he was similar to Mick Williams. I guess that was Wanstead. What Wanstead must have said at the time. He's kind of in the mold of Mick Williams, who had just graduated that year and played at Pitt. And Mick Williams was a pretty good player at Pitt, but boy, Aaron Donald turned out to be a little bit better than Mick Williams.
Aaron Donald might be one of the best defensive player outside of Hugh Green, or like I can't think of
well, you have a guy later on this. Yeah, you have a guy later on this list that was pretty good too. But yeah, just what he did in the NFL. I would have never. I root for Pitt guys, and I'm a homer Pitt fan, but I would have never guessed he would literally become one of the greatest. Like he could be top 10 all time in league history as far as defensive players. I mean, that's not a stretch.
He really
is
as good as Mean Joe Green. Yeah, he really is. He's already as good as Mean Joe Green.
He is.
So. Okay, keeping it going with the Pitt guys here. The next guy I kind of slipped up and mentioned his name, Darrelle Revis, and another guy born in Aliquippa. Something in the water there. Not sure what's going on. His background was he was a big time high school star at Aliquippa. He went to Pitt and left after his junior year. Why he's famous? He was drafted by the New York Football Jets. No, it's just the New York Jets. In 2007, he was a 14th round. He was a first round pick, the 14th pick. So the Jets, for some reason, they're in love with Pitt players, which probably explains why the Jets have sucked for a long time. I mean, Pitt has a few good players, but geez, come on, It's funny, while negotiating his contract with the Jets, they would fly his mother in to help with the contract negotiations. He played for the Jets for like 5 years. Revis, he's really good, but like sometimes like guys that play in New York, and there's another guy further on down this list that this definitely more applies to than him. Like I think sometimes their reputations get inflated. So I don't know. Um, he played for Tampa for like one forgettable year. I don't even who was that, Lovey Smith, or I don't even remember who was the coach in Tampa that year. But in 2014, they traded him to the Patriots, and that's when he won Super Bowl 49 with them. He had a second stint with the Jets. It was kind of forgettable. He made a Pro Bowl in 2015. It's funny, like Woody Johnson accused the Patriots of what's it called, tampering, but then Woody Johnson got fined for tampering. So, like I said, Robert Kraft can do whatever he wants, tampered as much he wants, but Woody Johnson not so much, I guess. Um, he ends up with 29 interceptions. He's made 7 Pro Bowls and had 1 Super Bowl championship. He was a 2-time first team All Big East. The New York media named him Revis Island. That stinky New York media. No, but Revis Island because he was so dominant against wide receivers. To just like to put Aaron Donald, this even puts Aaron Donald more in perspective because he has those 3 Defensive Player of the Year. Like Darrelle Revis never won a Defensive Player of the Year, and the one year he was really close. And Rex Ryan, who was the coach of the Jets that year, said that he had the most impact corner has ever had in the National Football League. That's my opinion. Apparently, that wasn't how everybody felt. A number that I think would be interesting would be 8. No, that's not the number of amount touchdown passes that Green Bay's, that was Charles Woodson, who was the Defensive Player of the Year, gave up against Arizona. That is the number of touchdown passes we gave up all season. And the biggest reason for that is Darrelle Revis. So that was Rex Ryan kind of arguing why Darrelle Revis, and he couldn't even make Defensive Player of the Year once, never mind 3 times. So that's kind of crazy. On to the good old Pittsburgh connection. He grew up in Aliquippa. In the Class 2A PA State Championship game, he scored 5 TDs in one game. So he's like kind of the original Al Bundy. He gets, I scored 5 touchdowns in one game for good old quips, for the good old quips there. 3 were rushing. 1 was a punt return and a blocked field goal return for a touchdown. Of course, Aliquippa went on to win a state title in that game. And he went to Pitt and he started as a freshman. And he was not just starting, he was really good as a freshman. That freshman year, he had a game against Boston College where he tackled a guy on 4th and goal to come up short and preserve Pitt's lead at that point. So in his junior year, we'll definitely have to link to this. He had a spectacular punt return for a touchdown against West Virginia. And I think if you watch it carefully, you see Pat McAfee, who's like kind of become like an internet, he does a lot of podcasting. You see him miss a tackle on there, but that's an amazing punt return.
Yeah, he was another guy that was so good at Pitt. And I remember his junior year, the last year at Pitt was 2006, which was a very mediocre Pitt team. And I had season tickets that year, and I would sit at the game. I remember the game against Virginia specifically. My brother and I were sitting there. It was a boring, kind of low scoring game. And whenever Virginia had the ball, we wouldn't watch the ball. We would just watch Revis, and we'd watch him cover whoever the Virginia receiver was on the left side of the field. And the whole first half, Virginia never once throws in that direction, just never once. And then finally in the third quarter, they're just like, you know what? Forget this. How good can this guy really be? So they finally throw to that side of the field. And again, I'm watching Revis the whole time. And Revis jumps in front and it's a pick 6. And I was like, man, this guy is just unbelievably talented. And when he got drafted, I'm 99% sure of this. I'd have to look it up. But I believe the Jets traded up to get him. And I believe it was a pick or 2 ahead of where the Steelers were drafting that year. And the Steelers ended up with Lawrence Timmons, who was a really good player. But they needed a cornerback at the time. And there was a good chance they could have drafted him. And that always stung. I just, and again, it wasn't that they just didn't have an high pick. It was that the Jets traded up in front of them.
That would have been, yeah. I mean, but I guarantee you, he doesn't. He plays in Pittsburgh. He doesn't have the hype that he has now, and he's definitely going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, right? I mean, when
Yeah.
did he last play?
Yeah.
2017, 2016. So I'm surprised he's not in already. Because how long do you have to wait? 4 years, 5 years?
Yeah. I'm not sure, but he definitely belongs in the Hall of
It's
Fame.
going to be the next year or two. I would guarantee you he's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So
Yeah. He's an all-time great, and yeah, very, very good. And I just looked it up. Yes, the Jets traded the Carolina had the 14th pick, Steelers had the 15th pick, and the Jets traded up to get Carolina's pick at number 14 and took Revis right before Timmons. So I don't know that the Steelers would have taken him, but there was a lot of scuttlebutt that the Steelers were interested, and the Jets literally traded up and stole him away. So that always stung.
well, keeping in the theme of people from Aliquippa, the next guy from Pitt is Mike Ditka, and now there's another one of those guys. If you said Mike Ditka, people probably would say coach of the Chicago Bears, not a Pitt player. So he fits perfectly into this conversation. He was born in Carnegie and he grew up in Aliquippa. And why he's famous, he was drafted by the Bears in the first round, 5th overall. He played on he played on the 1963 Chicago Bears championship team. I did not know that. I did know this. He caught a TD pass in a Super Bowl win for the Cowboys in Super Bowl 6. He coached the Bears to a 15-1 record and won Super Bowl 20 in that famous blowout over the New England Patriots with, that great Super Bowl shuffle defense of the 85 Bears. He also that year had a fist fight with Buddy Ryan in the locker room, it was in the shower of halftime of the Miami game, which was their only loss of the game to another Pitt guy. So you might say, oh, what's the Pittsburgh connection? Well, he went to Pitt, and at Pitt, this is like 1960s, so they did not throw the ball a lot. He led Pitt in receptions, and he was an All-American at Pitt as a two-way end. So he played both defense and offense in like the early 60s. That's wild. He is he's also in both the college and pro football Hall of Fame. So that's pretty impressive. That's like we just started the Pitt guys, and that's probably like Darrelle Revis and what's his name are probably both gonna be a Hall of Fame. And so there's another guy that is in the Hall of Fame. So Pitt's gonna have more people going to the Hall of Fame pretty soon here, at least the pro one. I mean, that's crazy. And he, of course, famously traded all the Saints draft picks for Ricky Williams when he was coaching the Saints. Maybe not
Yes.
not a good moment for. And then some of his interviews, like I remember the one time, like next they're like, what do you think your defense? It's thanks. Next question. Like I remember him doing like one of his post game interviews like that. So he could be a little prickly at times, but he's from Pittsburgh, Aliquippa guy, so he's gonna be a little prickly. But
Yeah, and to your point, Pitt's something like 4th or 5th on the list all time of colleges with Hall of Fame NFL
they're
players.
I think they're third. They're right behind Notre Dame and USC. They're third.
And they definitely
they're only going to get more.
more.
They're only going to get more. Yeah.
Well,
No,
they'll have three. They'll have 3 more guaranteed. They'll have Fitzgerald, Donald, and Revis. Shady McCoy probably is not going to make it. But definitely they'll have 3 more here coming up soon.
Yep. Which kind of like makes you scratch your head. Why don't they have more national championships? But that's a subject for another podcast.
Oh, I know why they don't have more national championships. We already did a whole podcast about the tragic losses that they always seem to find.
Sticking with our Pitt guys, next one of my favorite, like just football players and just people in general, is Curtis Martin. And the background, he grew up in Pittsburgh. He lived in Point Breeze for his high school years. He went to Aldernays. He had a great career, and he played for some pretty bad teams. He literally was the only good player they had. He had a great junior year with 1,075 yards and 20 touchdowns. He had that great game against Texas. Were you at that? I was at that Texas game. Were you at the Texas game where he had 251 yards rushing?
I was not.
Unfortunately, he got hurt the next. Yeah, he got hurt the next week, and he didn't play the rest of. That was his senior or junior year. And Johnny Majors tried to talk him into staying, but he just went against that and went. He was drafted by the third round by Bill Parcells. He had 100 yards rushing in a game against Cleveland, and I remember after the game, Bill Parcells called him a one-game wonder. But I think Bill Parcells is probably the best thing that ever happened to Curtis Martin, and why Curtis Martin's in the NFL Hall of Fame, because he needed that guy to kind of like, bring him down to earth and, keep him working hard. And and I think he said that in interviews that like he's really grateful to Bill Parcells. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year that season and made the Pro Bowl. In 1997, he did go to the Jets and had an outstanding career, retiring in 2007. He only played in one Super Bowl, and the Patriots lost that one to Green Bay. He did finish his career with 14,101 yards rushing. He had also had 90 touchdowns, and I think the yards rushing was the fifth highest total in NFL history when he retired. He's a 5-time Pro Bowler. He led the league in rushing in 2004. Which is impressive because he had been in the league almost 10 years. So he had just had like a steady, good career. He had a great junior year at Pitt, that 1,075 yards and 20 touchdowns. Martin famously wrote a letter to Coach Majors later saying they should have listened to him. There's a cool video with all kinds of great Curtis Martin highlights. We'll have to post too. And here we go, Tim. Here I ranked the most successful Pitt guys, and Aaron Donald, Mike. It is in order, like from I think the best to the this is like picking among your kids. You're not going to go wrong with any of these guys. Aaron Donald, Mike Ditka, Darrelle Revis, Curtis Martin. I didn't pick Tony Dorsett, who's probably better in both college and the pros than some of these guys, but that's just because I think he won the Heisman, so I think he was already famous. Like people probably know that he played at Pitt more than a lot of these other guys would remember that. And there's also another person left off. Any argument with any of those people, higher, lower?
No,
there is one
no.
person I left off, but that's
You're going to cover him in the next section. Yeah. No, all four of those guys were great. And Curtis Martin, to your point, you and I, we talked about this in a previous episode, I think, but you and I sat through so many games at Pitt Stadium in the mid 90s where it was like opposing team 42, Pitt 7 in the third quarter, right? Like literally, and I'm not exaggerating. Go look at the scores from some of those years. I am not exaggerating when I say that. And the only reason that we stuck around to the third quarter, the fourth quarter, was just to watch Curtis Martin run the ball, because he was so good on such a terrible, awful team. So yeah, I love Curtis Martin, and him winning the rushing title in his 30s. He also that year, Steve, had a partially torn MCL. He for most of the season, and he won the rushing title. So you're right. He was the way he was able to do that all through his career. For running backs usually have their really good 4 or 5 seasons at the beginning of their career, and then they break down, and he just had unbelievable staying power.
Yeah, he kind of did it like 5 yards at a time too, because I think he lost. He was always kind of like one of those tweener back. Like he was big enough to take on the defensive backs, but he was shifty enough to get away from the defensive linemen and linebackers. And he always seemed like, that's why maybe it was that Parcells influence. He'd always get like 4 yards. Maybe not a lot of explosive plays, especially later in his career, but he did 4 or 5 yards like every time. And you get that, you're going to get first downs. And that's the name of the game in football. You getting first downs. So the guy, obviously, you're going to say, hey, Steve, of all the Pitt guys, there's this one guy they really had that was really good. Why is Dan Marino not on the list? Well, that's because he's in the next session. Eat that. So now we move into the maybe the most celebrated part of our list, and this will be Western Pennsylvania quarterbacks. And we'll just start right off with Dan Marino, since I kind of, went that. His background: he was born in Pittsburgh. He went to Central Catholic. And why was he famous? Well, he was drafted by the Dolphins in 1983. He was a 27th picked. He was behind like Todd Blackledge, which kind of stunk. But even that O'Brien guy who the Jets picked ahead of him didn't have a bad NFL career. There was just some stuff going on. I guess there was a lot of rumors and stuff about what he was doing. He was, maybe had some substance abuse problems, but whatever. I mean, I don't think you go to Miami in the 80s and have all that success and do a bunch of drugs. So I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. He was only rookie to ever lead a conference in passing his rookie year. He threw 48 touchdowns in one season, and that was finally broken by Peyton Manning years later. And then I guess Tom Brady broke that a couple years after that. He had, here you go, Tim. Here's a memory for you. He had 420 yards passing and 4 touchdowns in the AFC Championship game in 1984. What do we call it? The Harvey the Toast Clayton game?
Yeah, he torched the Steelers pretty good in that game.
He was a 5-time NFL passing leader, a 9-time Pro Bowler, a 3-time NFL touchdown leader. He retired with 61,361 yards, 420 touchdowns to 252 interceptions. Those 420 touchdowns still rank him 6th all time. And he did these awesome Isotoner glove commercials, which you'll just have to watch. And he did some pop commercials with another quarterback that'll be on our list. And he was pretty cool in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. So.
Laces out.
But that's kind of, yeah. The Pittsburgh connection, obviously, he born in Pittsburgh, grew up in South Oakland. He literally was living in the shadow of the cathedral. So he stayed home and went to Pitt. And he had a great career at Pitt. His probably biggest highlight is he led them to a last-minute win over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. The Pitt had 3 straight 11-1 seasons under Marino, and for his career, it's he threw 79 touchdowns and threw 69 interceptions, so that's a lot more interceptions than you would probably want. He really threw, I guess, 23 touchdowns a year his junior and senior year. It's kind of like, do you think he's still the top 5 NFL quarterbacks, Tim? Like when you do the list now, like with all the other guys that come along?
It's hard because he never won anything, and he never won anything at Pitt either. Like it's amazing that he never won a championship at either place when he was so talented. I wouldn't argue with putting him in the top 5. He was super, super good, but I think that's just a strike against him that he never won anything.
I mean, that team he played in San Francisco against another quarterback in our list later, that San Francisco team was really good. And Miami really wasn't. I mean, they were good, but they just weren't on the same level as that San Francisco 49ers team. And what was that, 1984, 83?
But in that era, the AFC team always got killed in the Super Bowl. But you had other guys that made the Super Bowl multiple times, like Elway and Kelly. And Marino, that was it. His second year, he made the Super Bowl, and then he played 15 more years, and he never made it back. And they were always good. The Dolphins were always a playoff team or close to it, and they just never, I don't know. So again, it's a strike against them. And you could go into the ins and outs of, who was around them and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the quarterback's the most important position. And again, it's just a strike against him that he never won anything.
It's not like Elway had the greatest Broncos team ever,
Right.
I mean, they had a lot of pretty not mediocre defenses on that team. So, sticking with Western Pennsylvania quarterbacks, the next guy is Joe Namath. The background was he played college football for Bear Bryant in Alabama. He won the next 1964 national championship there. He was recruited to Alabama by the legendary mustachioed Howard Schnellenberger. If you've ever seen that guy, he has a heck of a mustache. He was drafted by the Jets first overall in the NFL's St. Louis Football Cardinals, which is weird. Okay, he was drafted by an AFL and an NFL team. That's what's going on there. Right. So the Jets gave him more money, and he decided, well, I'm going to go play for the AFL Jets after. and the Jets let him play in the Orange Bowl because he wanted to play in the Orange Bowl for Alabama. So, why is Joe Namath famous? Well, probably the main reason I probably would have stopped right here with these two lines was he led the Jets to an upset of the Baltimore Colts 16-7 in Super Bowl III, and he made a guarantee about it. So that's kind of like Andy played New York. So that's probably the three reasons why Joe Namath is so famous. Because let's get into the stats. And this is like I've heard this a lot about Joe Namath, and maybe it's fair, maybe it's unfair. I don't know. The guy won a Super Bowl when he wasn't supposed to, and had a pretty decent career. What do you want? He had a lot of injuries too. So he has 137 touchdowns and 220 interceptions in the NFL. So that's very Terry Bradshaw-esque. He has 27,663 yards passing, but they didn't throw the ball as much, even though the AFL did throw the ball more than the NFL. So you can throw all that in there. He did lead the AFL in passing in 1966 and 1967. Legendary Alabama coach Bear Bryant did call him the greatest athlete I've ever coached. So, I mean, Bear Bryant thought he was really good. Off the Super Bowl win, he became like this pop cultural icon, and the New York media really hyped him. I think if he played anywhere else, he would have been like Dan Fouts or Dan Pastorini, because he probably like had a kind of career like those guys had. For some reason, he was considered a hippie because of his sideburns. There's a great Simpsons clip of like Abe, like his wife like falls in love with like with Joe Namath because of those darn sideburns. He also did this awesome pantyhose commercial, which is just odd for the 70s or 60s, whenever that was. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1965. He starred in a bunch of movies, including and not limited to. I did not list all his roles here. These are just the ones I thought were interesting or funny. He was in the Brady Bunch, The Love Boat, Alf, The A-Team, Married with Children, and The Simpsons twice. And there's not that reference. So there's some clips like with Joe Namath on the Love Boat, and then him. I have a clip too of Joe Namath throwing a touchdown pass to Bobby Brady when he was in the
Nice.
Yeah. So he definitely parlayed Super Bowl III into like a nice little pop culture thing. And of course, this is not including the "I want to kiss you," but I mean that's just Joe. How many times do you think that worked for Joe over the years? Just like being in wherever, and like saying that to and they totally fell for it. So. You go, Joe.
I never. So when I was a kid, I used to despise Joe Namath because he just. I thought he was so worshipped, and and it was overrated. I thought he was so overrated. When the NFL had their 75th season in '94, I think they did like an all-time team, and they picked 4 quarterbacks, and he was one of the 4 quarterbacks. I'm like, really? He's one of the 4 greatest quarterbacks in NFL history? Are you kidding me?
In 1994?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
So, I think the narrative has definitely changed since then. Like you said, you hear a lot about the interception to touchdown ratio. The narrative has for sure softened, because I think what happened is, he had the perfect cross section of being in New York, being part of that counterculture kind of phenomenon that was happening in the 60s, right? He was part of that. He was anti-establishment, and people, especially young people of that generation, really latched onto it. And then they all became, sports writers or whatever later. And so that got a lot of mileage off of that. I think once that kind of wore off for people, and they could actually look at his career instead of, a guy that they worshiped as being like, yeah, down with the establishment. Then it was a little more clear that his career was, like you said, very like Dan Fouts, like definitely a good player, probably Hall of Famer, but definitely not top 4 in NFL history or anything close to that. He did win that Super Bowl. That was big because the AFL was a nothing league. There's no way they were going to compete with the NFL, and so that was a milestone moment in league history, because it really made it where those AFL teams were taken seriously for years to come. So not it wasn't nothing. That was an important moment, but I just always thought his fame and why he was so good was overblown for those reasons.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on the AFL being a nothing league, since the AFC, which was derived from the AFL, won what 7 of the next 10 Super Bowls or something insane.
Oh,
So
I'm not saying it was nothing.
I
Like, I'm saying that
realized
was the
I realized 4 of them were by some team in Pittsburgh, but
no,
Kansas City did win one, and the Jets won one, and I
Miami
think
won
the
2, Oakland
Raiders
won
won.
1. No,
Yeah,
no,
and yeah. So
I'm saying that was the perception. I'm just saying that was the perception at the
okay.
time, was that the AFL was a nothing league and they had no business competing, with the NFL, and they staged this little AFL NFL game every year, but it was a waste of time because the whoever won the NFL championship game, that was the real best team in football, and then the Jets came in and really dominated the Colts in that game. So again, can't take anything away for that, but yeah, Joe Namath overrated. And then he was also an announcer when I was a kid, and he was always on like the, like the F team, like the whatever, like, they always have like 8 pairs of announcers, and he was always like the guy at the bottom. And so back then, because the Steelers
He's
stunk.
the Iron Eagle. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Eagle.
And so he would always announce Steeler games, and he was terrible. He'd forget, he wouldn't know anybody's name. He would call guys by their number. And even when I was a kid, I was like, wow, this guy doesn't even know the names, and he just coasts on
Number
his
42 is great.
that literally, I'm not kidding. That's what he would do. And so yeah, I was never a Joe Namath fan, but again, the Super Bowl III, it was a big moment, way overrated still, but can't take it away from him.
As for the Pittsburgh connection, he did grow up in Beaver Falls, and he was a great basketball and baseball player. He won a WPIAL championship at Beaver Falls in football. His team went 9-0, and that was in Class 2, whatever that was in the 60s or 50s. I guess that would have been the 50s even. And he had offered to play baseball for the Pirates, but good old Broadway Joe. I think one of his teammates at Alabama actually gave him that nickname when he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. So staying with the Western Pennsylvania quarterbacks here. Next guy, Jim Kelly. He was born in Pittsburgh, raised in East Brady. And why is he famous? He was a 1983 first-round draft pick, 14th, so he was ahead of Dan Marino in that infamous draft. He was one of the 6 quarterbacks taken in that draft. Todd Blackledge and Tony Eason were taken before him, and Dan Marino. Oh God, wow! Who screwed that draft up? Oh my God!
The Patriots and the Jets, apparently.
Well, no, that was Kansas City. Todd Blackledge.
Oh, Blackledge. Oh, well, Tony
O'Brien. I get, like, O'Brien had a respectable. He's not Dan Marino or even Jim Kelly, but he did have a respectable NFL career.
And Tony
Eason and Tony Eason were a joke. Okay.
Well, Tony
Why
Eason
they were even in they should, if they were a 4th or 5th round pick, you're like, okay, well, you took a flyer, they didn't work out in the first round. Come on. Yeah.
Tony Eason did take the Patriots to a Super Bowl. He promptly went like 0 for 10 and got pulled in the second quarter, but that's all right. He did get them to a Super Bowl, so he's got
what
that
about
on
Grogan?
his resume.
Didn't they have Grogan? They ended up playing Grogan the rest of the game, didn't they? Was that Steve?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was like 100 years old at the time, but that was the 85 Bears. I mean, you could have put, you could have put Tom Brady in his prime in that game, and it would have still been a pretty uphill climb.
So he's another guy. He kind of pulled a Joe Namath. He played for the USFL and Donald Trump for Houston for 2 years because he didn't want to play in Buffalo. I guess he played, enough cold weather. So he actually played in he went to Miami, the University of Miami, because he didn't want to play in the cold either. Well, we'll get into that later. Let's get into more of his pro stats. Stick with that. 5-time Pro Bowler. He had 237 touchdowns and 175 interceptions. It was pretty decent. 35,000 passing yards. NFL passing leader in 1990. A passing TD leader in 91. He has 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances, and they developed the no huddle offense, or the K gun, around him. And in 2002, he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. This is unbelievable. So how many guys is that now? Are we up to 3? All these guys? Yeah, all 3 of these guys are in the Hall of Fame It's unreal. This is unreal, Tim. It's just unreal. So the Pittsburgh connection was he was born in Pittsburgh. He's raised in East Brady. I remember my sister would go to some camp up in Reimersburg, and we'd have to drive through East Brady. They have like a big sign on the edge of town and be like Jim Kelly, and that was back in like the '90s. He'd be like Jim Kelly, quarterback for the Bills. You know, they're really proud of him. He played at East Brady High School. They threw 44 touchdowns. He threw 44 touchdowns and one interception. He threw one interception in high school. That's sick. He turned down an offer to play at Penn State for Joe Paterno because Paterno wanted him to play linebacker, and Jim was like, no, I'm playing quarterback, and I want to go somewhere it's warm. Once again, Howard Schnellenberger sneaks into Western Pennsylvania and steals a quarterback right out from Pitt and Penn State's noses. Well, that kind of sucks because, boy, they could have. Well, no, that was the same time as Marino, so Pitt couldn't have used them. So I guess Jim Kelly had to go somewhere else. He led Miami to 2 upsets of Penn State, so that really came back to bite the old Joe Paterno's there. So a really good player, generally good guy. I mean, just they got unfortunate. They lost 4. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever going to go to 4 Super Bowls in a row. You know, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So I mean, good for him. But he's a good quarterback. He really is. He really is, Tim. What any memories of Jim Kelly there?
I was a big Jim Kelly fan. I rooted for Buffalo in all 4 of those games. I really liked that team, Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed and all those guys. I just, it was a good team, and it was a shame they did not win one.
Yeah, I really hope. I mean, I don't think just go. I always get sucked in. My dad always got sucked in by the Saints. I always get sucked in by Buffalo. I like even this last year when they lost. Who they lose? Kansas City. It was like
In the
come on,
championship game, yeah.
Yeah, and I really like that quarterback, that Allen. He's developed nicely. He reminds me of Terry Bradshaw. I think that team has a legit shot at the Super Bowl. But yeah, it'd be nice. Like, and they haven't won a championship since 1966, I think, or 1968. One of the, I mean, yeah, I think it's 66, the AFL championship. So, if anybody probably deserves one there, it's the long suffering fans of Buffalo. And who was the Tim Russert? He was always the guy on Meet the Prey. He was always a huge Buffalo fan.
Yeah.
Always got disappointed 4 years in a row. So, but he was Jim Kelly, great player, and boy, that's tic tac. Is that 3 in a row? Are we up to 3? Well, we're going to keep the streak going here with the next guy, Johnny Unitas. Maybe you heard of him. Probably. His background, he tried out for Notre Dame, but Coach Frank Leahy said he was too skinny and would get killed out there. He actually went to Louisville, and he kind of had an up and down career there. He was hurt his senior year and didn't play very much. The Steelers did draft him in the 9th round. Just for perspective, there's only 7 rounds now. He was, of course, infamously cut by Steelers coach Walt Kiesling. Do you know who the quarterbacks they kept instead of him? Does it even matter?
It really doesn't. I mean, they didn't
the water boy.
They didn't want to develop rookies, so that was really the thing. They wanted to go with veteran players, and so they cut one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history.
Yeah, there's a story by Dan Rooney about after they cut him, like driving down West Liberty Avenue, and they ran into Johnny Unitas, like, in a car, and they're like, and his dad, like the chief was real nice, like, oh, I hope it works out for you, because the chief's a really nice guy and he's not like a jerk, and Kiesling was in the back seat, I guess, in the car with Dan, the chief, and he's just like sinking down. You're like, like, don't see me, but wow, that had to be uncomfortable. So he goes for a year after getting cut. He actually worked construction in Pittsburgh, and he played for a semi-pro football team for $6 a game, which I imagine that was the 50s. I don't know if that was a lot of money back then. I don't know. My grandfather used to tell me he made $50 a week, so I don't know. Is that a lot of money back then? I don't know. Whatever. For his first pass as a starter was an interception that got returned for a touchdown by the Bears. He'd always say that was his first touchdown, even though he started a game. He didn't start. He played in the game before that. But let's go on to the why is Johnny Unitas famous? Well, Johnny Unitas is famous because he started a streak of 47 games with a touchdown, and it's still the fourth in league history behind Peyton Manning with 51, and Tom Brady with 52, and Drew Brees with 54. So that was a long time ago. In the NFL 1958 championship game, this is more like what he's famous for. This is considered the game that kind of put NFL football on the map. He drove the Colts down the field against the Giants to tie the game, and then he led the game-winning TD in overtime for the championship game. It's still one of the greatest games in NFL history. It definitely thrusts the NFL into the limelight. He won the NFL championship the next year. He did win. He did end up getting a Super Bowl ring with the Colts. He won Super Bowl V. He was hurt that game. Like I think him and I think Morrill was still on that Super Bowl V team, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So they were still going back and forth. That was the leftovers from Super Bowl III that finally got a Super Bowl win. He finished his career with 40,000 passing yards and 290 touchdowns. Just for comparison, Drew Brees has 80,000 passing yards and 571 touchdowns. Tom Brady has 79,000 and 581. So they have a lot more, but they passed the ball more then. So you figure they didn't pass the ball. The pass interference rules were different. The field stunk. I'm sure, training wasn't what it is now, but Johnny Unitas was just in really good. What makes him I think this almost I should almost put this in the Pittsburgh connection because this is such a Pittsburgh guy thing to do. This is so Pittsburgh. Well, just to finish up, Unitas was a Super Bowl champion, NFL champion twice, 3-time NFL MVP, and he led the league in passing 4 times. He's just a really good quarterback. When the Colts moved to Indy, when the who's the current goofball owners of that franchise?
Irsay's.
It was Irsay's father. I think it was Irsay's father who moved the team because Rosenblum had moved on to own the Rams, I think, by that point.
Correct.
He asked the Colts he asked actually at the NFL Hall of Fame to only display his memorabilia because I guess he had already been inducted in the Hall of Fame because when the Colts moved in 83, the early 80s, only is playing for Baltimore in the Hall of Fame. Just like, nope, they wouldn't do it because he's like, I never played for Indianapolis. And when Indianapolis would have reunions, he wouldn't go. Why would the Irsays do that? It's like, hey, let's celebrate Super Bowl V, which was in Baltimore. I mean, I don't know who can understand what the Irsays do or don't do, but it's just so weird. So the Pittsburgh connection, he grew up in Mount Washington, and he wanted to play at Pitt. Johnny Unitas really wanted to play at Pitt, but he could never pass the entrance exam, so that's why he had to go to Louisville. The Steelers did draft him in the 9th round. He had that cut. He was cut by them. And you know what? He just was general. Like he had to play, for Pittsburgh. That's the whole Pittsburgh connection. Play in those years in those semi-pro teams for all that little bit of money before he actually went to the Baltimore Colts, and caught on with them. So pretty impressive, like rags to riches. Almost like a Kurt Warner kind of story for him before. Actually, they're making Kurt Warner movie. I don't know if you heard that, Tim.
But I saw the trailer. Yeah.
Yeah. So he died a couple years ago, Johnny Unitas, but he's still probably one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Hard to argue with that one. Anything you remember? I remember your dad telling me he saw Unitas play with San Diego, like when the Steelers defense was good and they were like trying not to hurt Johnny Unitas. Like normally, like I guess the defensive players like Joe Green and them would just totally plow quarterbacks. It was like they're kind of gently placing him on the ground.
Yeah, and they were kind of picking him up too, like trying to help him get up. That was at the very end of his career, and in the 70s when the Steelers had that good defense and the Chargers were kind of a joke of a franchise. He talks about that. HBO did a documentary on him when he was still living, and he talked about that season. Just he was so out of place, and he walked into a room and all the guys were smoking weed, and they asked him to hey, come join us, and he's like, I think I'm in the wrong room, guys. Like he was just super out of place in that culture. So and Southern California in the 70s, and so it was kind of a little bit of a sad end to his career, but I mean, it didn't really overshadow all the stuff he did.
So, going on to our next, what is this? Our fifth Hall of Famer? Are we a fifth Hall of Fame quarterback here, Tim? Yeah. And this is our last but not least here. But I've saved the best for last here. That would be one Joe Montana. And when I started researching this, I did not realize how good Joe Montana was. And I always knew he was really good, but it's pretty hard to argue that Joe Montana isn't really good. You're going to be impressed here. So he went to Notre Dame in 1974, and he won a championship with the Fighting Irish in 1977. He, of course, played in the infamous chicken soup game where he had a comeback win against Houston while playing sick with the flu. I guess he ate some chicken soup at halftime, and they said, "Oh, it's a miracle cure." In 1979, he was drafted by the 49ers in the third round with the 82nd pick. So why is this Montana guy so famous? He's not Tony Montana. He's Joe Montana. In the NFC Championship game, he threw a pass to Dwight Clark, the catch. That kind of started the 49ers dynasty in the 80s. He had a great comeback to a Dallas defender who said, "You just defeated America's team." Montana was like, "Well, you and the rest of America watch us play the Super Bowl." Yeah, get him, Joe. So that's just the kind of guy Joe is. He's kind of well, he's more laid back and cool. He just has like a real steady demeanor. So he's like a good guy. Like if you're down like a couple points, you kind of want like that calm guy that's kind of confident. He led a comeback in Super Bowl 23 against Cincinnati and Dick LeBeau's defense. He completed 8 for 9 passes on that final drive of that game. The game-winning TD to John Taylor, the one receiver for 49ers. And the best part is before leading that comeback in the Super Bowl, he was like, "Oh, look, there's John Candy sitting in the stands." He was just like, "Oh yeah, just checking out the stand." Like, "Oh yeah, he's not worried about the Super Bowl or being down a couple points at the end of the game." Nah, Joe's got it under control. So that's why he had the nickname Joe Cool. He was always so calm under pressure. This is where it gets a little wild here. Okay, are you ready for some Joe Montana stats? And I think I did pick some like career stats, but his playoff and postseason stats are unreal. So he had 4 Super Bowl wins and no losses. There's only one other person can say that, and that's Terry Bradshaw. He threw 11 touchdowns and no interceptions. Terry Bradshaw can't say that one. And he threw for over 1,142 yards. So no interceptions I think that's just I don't know I think that might just be the Super Bowl. Not even Tom Brady can say that. So for his career, he had 273 touchdowns and 40,000 passing yards, which, I know those other guys are up over 80,000 passing yards, but different game, different rules. Definitely one of the top 4 quarterbacks of all time. I think he gets a little overshadowed. Like, it's hard to believe. I never thought Joe Montana would kind of it was always like the argument, but I don't know. Like, let's say that for there. We'll save it for the end. I have some highlights of Joe Montana clips, and I also have a great interview with him and Rich Eisen where he tells the John Candy story probably better than I did. The Pittsburgh connection was he grew up in Monongahela. He played at Ringgold, which is down in the Finleyville area in Washington County. And I guess he had a great game against Monessen. He threw 3 touchdowns and 233 yards passing. Ringgold Stadium is named after him. He also has some bridges. If you ever go on PA 43, that highway, there's some bridges on there that are named after him. Obviously the people, in Ringgold and stuff. And is he the greatest quarterback of all time, Tim? Still, I don't know. I mean,
I think you can make the
probably.
argument. I think Brady. I mean, it's really hard to say Brady's not after 7 Super Bowls, including one at last year when he's 45. So it's hard to not say Brady. But I mean, if you're going to do a top 3, there's no doubt he's in the top 3. And again, that's another guy I was a big fan of when he played, and his contemporaries were, the Marino, Warren Moon, Boomer Esiason, the great, really great quarterbacks then, but Elway, but guys that didn't, again, if you were down in the final minutes of a clutch game, Montana was your guy. And the John Candy story, I mean, that's referenced to this day. Ben Roethlisberger talked about that whenever, he was in that moment in the Super Bowl, and he said, "I wish I had a John Candy story, but I don't." And that was Joe Montana. He was the greatest. It was fun watching him play. I'm glad I got to watch him play. And it's a shame his career was really cut short because of the injury that he suffered in that playoff game against the Giants, or else they were on their way to a third Super Bowl in that game. And he could have done more. He really could have done more, and maybe would have had similar numbers to what Brady has.
Yeah. Well, so that leads us to that's just the greatest. Who is the greatest Western Pennsylvania quarterback of all time here, Tim? We got, and I listed this is how I went with it. I went Montana, Unitas, Marino, Kelly, and then Namath. Any arguments on that there?
No, I would have done it honestly in the exact same order. Well, I would have put Namath seventh if I could have.
I don't know if anybody we put like Bill Stahl ahead of him or Tyler Palco.
Yeah.
He got you never.
Yeah, I'll put Tyler Palco at sixth and Namath at seventh.
Rod Rutherford.
Hey, Tyler Palco started for the Kansas City Chiefs, so there's that.
Kerry Collins. I don't think Kerry Collins is born in Western Pennsylvania, was he? I don't know. I don't know where Kerry Collins is from. That'd be the only guy I could really even think of. He played for Penn State, but I don't know.
Yeah, he's from Scranton, so he doesn't count.
No,
that's
you can
a
hang
good
out
order.
at Dunder Mifflin, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good order. I think that makes sense. And again, if you're talking about that top three of all time, if you would say Unitas, Montana, Brady, I wouldn't argue with that. If you're really going across eras, you could definitely make the argument that Unitas and Montana are two of the top three of all time. And then Marino, I think, was a little better than Kelly. Both of those guys, had that slight against them of not winning a Super Bowl. And then Namath, just as I already said, I thought was overrated.
Well, how do you leave out like Bradshaw though? The guy won 4 Super Bowls. I know he threw a lot of interceptions, but I don't know.
I wouldn't put him in the top three.
And even then, I don't know. If I had 2 minutes to go in a Super Bowl, and I've said this before, if I'm not allowed to take Ben, who would be my first pick, and you say, okay, you're not allowed to take Ben, you got to take somebody else. I still, and this is going to I'm off the board with this pick because I've always said this about this guy. Give me Eli Manning. I take Eli Manning over Peyton Manning. So you're not even putting Peyton Manning in your top 5 there. So give me Eli with 2 minutes to go at the end of the game, because Eli, he has like that like Joe Montana like kind of attitude. Like he might have thrown 5 interceptions. He kind of has like Bradshaw has that too. Like that 5, like whatever. I'll just go out here and just ding 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 ding. Look at that! I found Plexico Burris in the end zone. Oh, look at that! I found David Tyree on a miracle pass, and he did it twice. Mario Manningham in that other Super Bowl. So I don't know. I'm a big Eli Manning. I know he threw way too many interceptions, but if I gotta have it, I'll live and die with Eli. He's all right in my book.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, it's and I'm saying top 3. It's really hard to pick a top 3 because you have Peyton Manning, you have Drew Brees, you have a ton of quarterbacks. You have Otto Graham, who won a bunch of championships back in the day. Sammy Baugh. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on of all time greats.
Bart Starr. We're totally forgetting about Bart Starr.
Roger Staubach.
I think Bart Starr won 5 if you include the NFL championships, don't you?
I think so. Yeah.
So they won 2 Super Bowls and 3 NFL championships. Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, you could just go up and down the list. There's tons of guys you could make the argument for. But I just think Unitas. I would, if I had to pick a top 3, it'd be Unitas, Montana, and Brady, and I would put them in the order of reverse of what I just said. I would say Brady, Montana, Unitas is my top 3.
I'm going Montana, and then I don't know. Let me see, Montana, and then I I guess I got to go Brady because of the 7, and he's had such good success in the post. And who was your third?
Unitas.
Who we normally Unitas? See, I don't know. Like,
It's hard. It's hard to go
I
across
I
eras.
would pick Elway. I would pick Elway over Unitas. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, Elway
I
was
never
really
saw
good too.
Unitas play.
Yeah,
I never saw Unitas play,
that's
and
fair.
I've seen Elway play, and I've seen all the guys that I'm talking about play. I think, right? Yeah. So I don't know. That's who I would go with. But
Yeah, that's fair.
there's no right or wrong answers here. So you probably win. You're gonna have a good chance of winning a Super Bowl with any of those quarterbacks.
Yes,
you're
not going to be too
hurting.
disappointed.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's the list. If you disagree with us, well, then you're just wrong. But if you want to voice your opinion, you're welcome. You're welcome to on our Twitter page. We have a Twitter, Pittsburgh Sports Memories. Weebly.com is our website. You're welcome to check us out there. Leave a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Hey, we even if you want to hear a future topic, hey, why don't you guys talk about this for an hour? Sure, we'll do it. But thanks a lot for tuning in.
Thanks, everybody.